Hi, and welcome to Gaston Spotlight. I'm Nick Wazenhorn. Our guest today is Dean Virgil Cox, who is retiring after 31 years of service to Gaston College. Welcome, Mr. Cox.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So tell us about your first day here at Gaston College.
Well, that was 31 years ago, and I'd just driven down from Maine, and about the very first thing they ended up having me do was to participate in graduation for the spring semester. It was a little different to arrive and essentially end up immediately breaking out all the regalia and up there announcing people's names and sending them. At that time we're doing graduation in the Myers Center in the auditorium, which is now a much bigger, different place. And the graduating class was, we did run several graduations. We used to run at least two, one at the end of the summer, one at the end of the spring. And we had probably 50 people that were actually graduating and participating at that time. But it was interesting to get started.
As soon as you arrived, having to be the first person, yeah.
You're immediately involved in the ceremonial aspects of with people that didn't know me and I didn't know them.
And here you are introducing them out there.
Yes.
Yeah. So how has Gaston College changed over the 31 years?
Well, one of the things that is very different, we have about twice as many buildings as we had 30 years ago. Just as one example, when I first arrived on campus, where our library now stands, there was a farmhouse.
Really?
Yeah, we ended up ultimately buying that property and expanding the campus in that direction. We had a fire training area where it is right now, but there were about all we had down there at that time was a small building and the burn building. The burn building is still there. We do continue with the fire stuff. But many of the buildings that are around, it had only just recently been turned from a parking lot into the quadrangle out here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been evolving, and now we've got places like CAM, which are essentially off campus, but connected. One day there'll be an easeway that will allow us to go straight from here to there without going through that dangerous circle out there. So we're looking forward to that. Yes, you make a left turn coming out of the access road over there, and you're taking your life in your hands.
Yeah, all the time, all the time. You are well known for your Spectrum lecture for new students. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, actually, that is basically a very philosophical thing, because it took me 60 years, 55 plus, to sort of figure out what was going on that put us in a position that we just seemed to be constantly sending students off in a direction that wasn't really appropriate for them. I didn't, most of my life I've been involved in hierarchies we don't think about it directly that way, but if you step back and take a look at how society has structured a lot of things, there is a real significant hierarchical bias that exists in just an enormous amount, all over the place.
Right.
It's not obvious. It doesn't stick out at you. And the reason it doesn't is because it's been there for years. And you grew up with it that way. So until it starts banging against something that you want to do, that you're trying to accomplish, and you end up banging up against it, ultimately you have to think about it in those terms.
Right.
And what was happening was that I recognized that in advising students, what you needed to do is to help them identify what it was they ultimately wanted to do for a living or with their education.
Yeah.
But the educational structure and processes aren't set up to do that. They're set up so that, there's high school. Well, high school's better than 8th grade, so a high school education is better than 8th grade education. Oh, but that also means that, a college education is better than a high school education. And we kept building this sort of hierarchical structure, which automatically, without thinking about it, biases your thought processes so that when you start looking at, what am I do for an education? Well, higher is better. Society says it is.
Yeah.
Okay? Is that really the case? Well, no, it isn't. It really is not the case. The most important thing you can do is to help that student get an education which leads them to what's best for them. Not best for society, not best for this hierarchical structure, what's best for you
Kind
as
of
a
help
student.
show them the way.
And in order to be able to do that, you have to take that vertical, that hierarchical structure, which automatically tells you the further up you go, the better off you are, and rotate it into a spectrum, which now allows you to get that automatic biasing out of the system, and then you can answer the question, what's best for me? What do I want to do? And when you start dealing with engineering education, which is largely where I've been, then you end up with having a real problem of ambiguity of the English language. Because when somebody says, I want to be an engineer, I don't know whether they want to drive a railroad train or get a PhD in electrical engineering and do research that keeps a rover moving around on Mars.
Right.
So here, on this structure, there's no question. Up here,
Yeah.
rotate it, and now you can start laying out, okay, what's best for you? What are the kinds of things you want to do? Then you back off and say, well, what in the world, from the point of view of education, what's the difference between these two educations? What's the core that exists in them? So if you begin to look at it, you ultimately can recognize that at the railroad end of the spectrum, there's a lot of craft skill. You're going to spend time in lab, in doing, etc., because you have to create that craft skill, because when you go on the job, that's what you're going to get paid for, and if you can't do it, you're going to get fired.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
At the other end of that spectrum, we've got PhD research people who are paraplegics. There's no expectation of craft skill. And I can look out there and I can line up these engineering field occupations based on craft skill, from non-existent to sort of important, kind of important, or really important. You're gone if you can't compete with the people who've been doing it for 20 years. The other part of that has to do with, well, what else happens in there? And the big change is the use of, that we get as engineers asked a very important question, and it's how much? And I, as an engineer, cannot answer that by saying lots or a little bit. It just doesn't work. They want a number. Well, that's fine, but that means I have to understand the meaning of the number.
Yeah.
Generally means I have to calculate the number. That automatically means I have to be able to deal with the mathematics behind the number. And the mathematics is, at this end, is job-appropriate math, and we'll teach you how to use it in that occupation. And at the other end of the spectrum, we put a man on the moon. Required answering hundreds of thousands of how much questions that had never been asked before, and required the use of extremely sophisticated mathematics. And you get this.
Yeah.
When you take that whole structure and rotate it this way, now I've got a spectrum. I can tell a student exactly what's happening across that spectrum from the point of view of education. Now you make your choice. And I've got tracks so that I can line you up with. And we now have some blurring in that because of the significant increase in technology that has taken place. And that's another thing which has really happened in the past 30 years. We have the technology we were using 30 years ago. When I came here, you can't even use it anymore.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Right.
People don't remember what a K-Pro computer was.
Yeah.
They've never heard about it. You know, it cost me $1,000.
Yeah. So, what are some of your favorite memories throughout the years here at Gaston College?
Well, we've had a lot of social events, and I think one of the things that sort of helps with Gaston College is it is connected with all of the other activities that take place pretty much in Gaston and Lincoln County. And so we've been in a position to be able to host and deal with a lot of really fun kinds of things. And high school students, junior high students, come on campus. It's really self-fulfilling and enjoyable to watch kids as they're learning about new things, and you sort of see the light bulbs go off. Yeah. That makes you feel good.
Yeah.
You realize, yep, it was worthwhile to do this today. So that's pretty much the kinds of things that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. I hear you used to play in the Academia Nuts. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the Academia Nuts was a group of Gaston College employees. We all played different instruments, and we did several different kinds of shows. It was a really enjoyable thing. We would practice and then be able to do things that it was fun. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, as long as it was fun.
It was. That's all there is, yeah.
So the 30 or 31 years you've been here at Gaston College, what's the craziest thing that you have seen happen?
Well, Actually, probably one of the craziest things is I was personally involved in. One of the shows that we did involved, we were dealing with, I don't recall the exact name of the number that we were going to do, but I was supposedly dressed up in a ape kind of uniform, and we'd set it up so that we could swing in on a rope, and so there was a set of doors at one end of the stage, and we ran a rope up, and the doors would open, I'd swing out, and then get my guitar, and we'd go ahead and play the song. Well, we didn't practice it. So anyhow, doors swung open, I swung out, swung back, and the doors closed behind me. So by the time I swung back a little bit, the doors were closed. And I hit those doors with my back. And because there were doors and a big vibration, it sounded terrible. You would have thought I would, hit it at going 80 miles an hour kind of thing. I was not bothered by it at all. But you could hear out of the entire audience. And I just let go of the rope, went over and got my guitar.
And started going.
And then we took
playing.
off. So yeah. We got a big round of applause and went on with the show.
They get up after that and start going, yeah.
Well, so I didn't even, I landed on my feet. I didn't even have to get up. I just hit the doors, and I just stepped forward. I didn't really, it was a non sequitur for me.
Yeah. So what will you miss the most?
That's a darn good question. Mostly because all of a sudden I'm going to have 40, 50 hours a week that I'm just spent, I've been in the workforce for 62 years now. I've never not had a boss somewhere. Yeah. So I've got a new boss. We've been living together for over 60 years. So it'll be interesting. I suspect I better get used to sitting in the garden weeding and a few other things of that variety. I think probably there's a lot of things I'd like to pick up the guitar and get used to playing it again, because I haven't really done that very much recently.
Kind of just dust off the old guitar.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good books out there to read, and I should have time to do that. And I don't watch television much. Maybe I can get hooked on something there. So it's going to be a whole new approach to time management.
Yeah.
But I think Patricia will be a big help in dealing with that.
Is that your boss?
That's my boss, yeah.
All right, so if you could leave a message for your faculty and students, what would that message be?
Keep the student learning outcomes always in the forefront. Yeah, that's really our reason for being here, for doing what we do. We have to take and understand, see into the future as best we can, help the students identify the kinds of things that they want to accomplish, and then put them on an educational track that will support them in that process. And if you can do that, then that's worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about some of the accomplishments of your division that you are most proud of.
Oh, Wow. So one of the things which has happened we used to have some very distinct levels of education, and if you look at this spectrum, one end used to be called industrial, the other end was BS engineering and beyond, and in the middle was engineering technologies. Well, engineering technologies have only been around since the middle 1900s. Previous to that, it was a wishy-wash, but they're pretty much the same kind of spectrum. For many, many years, if you got an industrial education, when you finished that, you were done.
Right.
There was no carryover. And if you did an ET, no carryover. Just as an example of what's happened in education, when I first came here, industrial was, in fact, at that point in time, to a very large extent, associate degrees were largely thought of, and community colleges were titled terminal education, as if after that there was nothing you could do.
Right.
That is no longer the case. I have 12 Associate of Applied Science degree programs. Every one of those programs has an institution in this state which will provide them, give that student 60 to 64 semester hours towards a bachelor's degree. We're no longer a terminal institution. And that's probably one of the major things which has affected what's going on. So, back to your question, which was, I think that our education system is now, these edges are, these dividing areas, because of technology, the significant increase in technology and some of the changes that have taken place that allow a student to go from an Associate Applied Science degree to a Bachelor of Industrial Technologies or whatever. Those lines are getting blurred. This is becoming more of a continuum. And I think that's probably a major thing that's going to continue, mostly because it's absolutely necessary.
All right. So now that you know that you've retired after 31 years, what are you going to do with your free time now?
She hasn't told me yet.
She hasn't told you yet.
Like I said, probably there's a million projects around the house that are going to, they've been laying there waiting for me. So that'll be where I start.
Waiting for this day. For you to start
doing stuff.
Yeah. Well, we know that the broadcasting department will definitely miss you. You have been a great leader for many, and do you have any final words?
Hang in there, keep doing what you're doing, because it's pretty clear to me you're on focus.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, being a guest, and thank you all for joining us here on Gaston Spotlight. We'll see you next time.